Hey y'all, it's Becky here from the Beckosphere, where we talk about climate news and solutions. You have entered the weekly climate recap, where we take a look at what progress is being made to mitigate and adapt to climate change. I'm still trying to figure out how I want to organize this, so y'all in the Beckosphere, let me know what you would prefer. Do you want like a day-to-day sort of thing, or split it up amongst topics, or do like, I don't know, a White House check and that kind of thing? I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments below, because I want to cater to you. Okay, but anyways, let's go ahead and get right into what happened last week. Well, starting from the 1st to today. The World Meteorological Organization, the WMO, announced that there is a 40% chance that the US will temporarily reach 1.5 degrees Celsius warmth in the next 5 years. It is terrifying to think that we are actually that close to temporarily hit 1.5 degrees Celsius of warmth, and naturally that probability will go up as time goes on. The Pentagon has requested $617 million in new investments for the U.S. military to properly adapt to climate change. It cited multiple natural disasters in recent years that were made worse by climate change and disasters for the military, such as California wildfires, severe flooding in the Missouri River, and Hurricane Michael in 2018. Australia's largest energy generator, AGL, is taking Greenpeace to court over trademark and copyright violations. But really, they're trying to quiet Greenpeace, who has been accusing AGL of greenwashing their products. Greenwashing is a corrupt marketing tool that spends more money on advertising how sustainable and environmentally friendly a product is than the company actually spends on making the product better for the environment. Staying in Australia, the Minerals Council of Australia, the MCA, announced its first Climate Action Plan progress report, which states that its emissions reduction actions have the potential to reduce the sector's overall emissions by 30%. The sector is committed to net zero emissions by 2050, which is very important as the world mines for minerals essential to the renewable energy transition. Meanwhile, in Brazil, rivers in the Amazon are rearing an all-time high, with Rio Negro being the fullest it's been since 1902. The La Niña season has a lot to do with this, but the extreme nature of this wet season has been linked to climate change, which alters the frequency and intensity of weather patterns. Then over in Islamabad, Pakistan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs coordinated with the Ministry of Climate Change, UN Department Program called the UNDP, and Urban Innovation to organize a biking tour across the city celebrating World Environment Day and promoting the Clean and Green Pakistan initiative. The event was called Pedal for a Green Future, and it was meant to preface the main World Environmental Day 2021 event, which took place June 5th in Pakistan. The Green and Clean Pakistan initiative calls for planting 10 billion trees for tsunami protection over the next 5 years and includes a new electric vehicle policy and green jobs initiative. Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan says the plan will enhance over 1 million hectares of forest by 2023 and get Pakistan to produce 60% of its electricity via clean sources by 2030. Back in the US, Biden suspends drilling leases in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge that were started by the previous administration. The EPA revealed that some of America's top methane emitters are actually small private drilling companies who have been filling in the gaps made by larger fossil fuel companies amidst backlash. These smaller companies, such as Hillcorp Energy, Terra Energy Partners, Flywheel Energy, Blackbeard Operating, and Scout Energy, have been able to remain under the radar while continuing the poor practice of allowing methane to leak during natural gas extraction processes. To me, this calls for a federal ban on methane emitting because this is just a gross practice and it needs to stop. Again, methane is a more potent greenhouse gas emission than carbon dioxide, though it doesn't stay in the atmosphere for as long. You can see the data collected by the EPA's Greenhouse Gas Reporting Program, or GHGRP, in the resource section below. An international study published by the journal Nature found that a majority of lakes around the world are losing their oxygen supply rapidly. This is due to a warmer global temperatures increasing stratification within the lakes. Now, stratification is basically the distinguishing of different water layers. Usually the natural mixing of warm and cold water in the lakes allows for oxygen to get spread across depths. But with the surface temperature increasing, less mixing is occurring, leading to some deeper parts of the lake losing their oxygen supply, which is detrimental to the organisms that call the lake home. In the business world, Toyota Motors announced Thursday that it is rebranding its corporate investments arm at Toyota Ventures and adding two funds, a $150 million Frontier Fund and a $150 million Climate Fund. The Frontier Fund will invest in technology such as artificial intelligence, automated vehicles, cloud computing, and robotics. It will also expand its scope of interest to include smart cities, digital health, fintech, mineral types, and energy forms. The Climate Fund will focus on technologies and companies working to rapidly reduce carbon emissions. The UN Environmental Programme, or UNEP's, Food and Agriculture Organization, or FAO, released a report looking at 15 top plant pests' reactions to climate change. And shocker, they love the warmer weather. A study found that climate change is increasing the pests' natural range, meaning they're able to cause havoc on the world's agriculture and ecosystems even more. You can read their full report in the resource section below. The world already loses 40% of its global crop production to pests and plants disease every year, which costs the global economy $220 billion annually. Another report by the UNEP FAO called for governments and businesses to triple spending and ecosystem restoration to restore at least 1 billion hectares, or 2.4 billion acres, of degraded land to combat climate change. That's roughly the size of China. Their push is under the hashtag Generation Restoration. They warn that humans are using 1.6 times the amount of planetary resources now, and that land degradation impacts 40% of human population, and half of the world's economic growth depends on nature. Back in Australia, the UK urges the country to step up its commitments to carbon reductions ahead of the G7 summit meeting in Cornwall later this week. It seems that Australia is now getting the attention that the US got before our change in administration. G7 countries' financial ministers met in London this week ahead of an international conference. Business giants like Netflix, Amazon, Disney, Salesforce, Microsoft, and Google formed a business alliance to scale climate solutions, or BASICS, with environmental groups like Environmental Defense Fund, the UNEP, and the World Wildlife Fund to help scale funding for climate solutions. U.S. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell pushed back on the idea that the Fed had a role to play in climate mitigation. He said that climate change is not the main consideration of financial policy. He argued that the role of the Federal Reserve is financial oversight, not setting public policy. This was in direct contradiction to what other bank chiefs had said recently, and in my opinion, oversight includes determining the parameters in which financial institutions are judged, which should include how these institutions factor in climate change. So, this news is the latest example of the US government quietly stepping back on big promises made during Earth Month and before. The White House approved 3 drilling projects last month, directly going against their promise to halt all existing projects on federal lands. The Biden administration also declined to act on the North Dakota pipeline project, which has faced mass protest over 5 years at least, and lacks a federal permit to begin with. It's thought that the White House is doing this to try to appease Republicans ahead of infrastructure talks But that's ironic because many progressive politicians in Congress have expressed concern that climate change is losing priority within these infrastructure talks. Another project Biden has declined to address is the Canadian-owned Enbridge Line 3 project in Minnesota, which is especially under fire by protesters right now, many of whom are Indigenous, and one of which is Jane Fonda. Over 100 protesters have been arrested and many others have been sandblasted by the Department of Homeland Security. A study by the British charity Oxfam found that climate change could cause G7 countries to lose nearly $5 trillion a year within the next 3 decades, which is twice as much as the pandemic cost them. And unlike the pandemic, this wouldn't be something economies could just bounce back from. Naturally, poor countries are also expected to experience much worse impacts. The World Bank found that 123 million people will be forced into poverty due to climate change in just the next 10 years without mass government action. An international study published by Science Brief Review further emphasized that climate change will increase extreme rainfall and flooding around the world, particularly flash flooding in urban interfaces. Speaking of one of those urban interfaces, in Miami on Sunday, the American Conservative Climate Coalition, or ACC, formed a rally to bring the conservative voice back into the climate conversation. I did a video a little while ago talking about conservative climate activism, and I'll link it in the corner. And finally, the National Oceanic Administration, or NOAA, or is it Association? I always mix up the A. Found that current CO2 levels are the highest they have been in 4 million years. Now, let's go back and take a look at the calendar. So the World Environmental Day 2021 event took place in Pakistan June 5th. The theme was ecosystem restoration. The G7 Climate Summit is taking place June 11th through 13th in Cornwall. And today is World Ocean Day. And you can learn more about all these events in the resources below. I hope to cover these events more on this channel in the future, like these kind of events, but I currently have no capacity to do that right now. And I hope you found this all interesting. Please let me know in the comments below what I missed, because I am sure I missed something. And also, Mickey and I, Mickey, who I'm doing the Climate Book Club with, and I are doing a video discussing nuclear plant shutdowns and projects going on right now. So if you have any questions for Mickey about old or new nuclear reactors or about nuclear energy in general, please pop them in the comments below so that we can answer them for you when that video comes out. Also, let us know if any plants are closing or being built in your area and what you think about that. And finally, remember to talk about the climate every single day, as I say every week, because it is essential to talk about it. And also try to support your local news organizations where a lot of this information originally came from. And tomorrow we will be discussing the last 2 chapters of How to Avoid a Climate Disaster by Bill Gates on Stereo at 5 p.m. And it will also premiere here on Thursday at 6 p.m. So look forward to that. Bye.